Hi BookTube. Today I'm doing the BookTube Top Tens Tag created by Old Blues Chapter and Verse, Jason. He's compiling data on the top 10 books of booktubers who will make a video. So that was part of what inspired me to create my channel, was so I could have a say about what my top 10 books are for at least this time in my life. I think it's subject to change. I think it's very arbitrary and subjective based on when the list is created. So out of all the books that I've really read and loved, I thought one criteria would be that I had to have read the book at least more than once, maybe 3 times or more, to actually include it on my top 10s. And so I was sitting there jotting down all the book titles that I thought I might use, and there's a whole honorable mention section, but these are the top 10 that I have come up with. So I'm going backwards from number 10 up to number 1. And so number 10 is Song of Solomon by Toni Morrison, which was published in 1977. I read this in my junior year of high school in my honors English class, and it was the first time I was exposed to writing like Toni Morrison's writing. Up to that point, I'd read a lot of women's commercial fiction, a lot of Stephen King novels, and whatever we'd been assigned to read in school, plus all the usual beloved children's books. And I was reading John Irving books. I'd read Garp and Hotel New Hampshire, and I think maybe that's it by that point. But Song of Solomon kind of opened a whole door to literature that I had not been exposed to, so I loved it. I love the weird names like Milkman. I love his journey story. I'm 100% sure that I did not understand everything that was happening in that book when I was that age. So when I was in my 30s, I downloaded the audiobook, and the one that was available at the time was narrated by Lynn Thigpen. You might remember her from Where in the World is Carmen Sandiego and other things. She has a gorgeous reading voice, and she did such a tribute to the book with the way that she read that story. And unfortunately, it's not available anymore. So, and I lost my Audible recording of that book. I must have had a separate account or something, so I can't access it, but the only place I can access it is in my own memory. So that solidified Song of Solomon for me. I've read other Morrison novels and I loved, but this is my favorite. So that's my number 10. Number 9 is a recent book. I've read it twice, and it came out in 2016. It's My Name is Lucy Barton by Elizabeth Strout. I saw on Goodreads someone arguing about whether or not the narrator in this novel is reliable or unreliable, and was the visit to her bedside from her mother imaginary or not. I totally disagreed with this reading of the book. I think the narrator is completely reliable. I think she doesn't come out and tell her story outright. You have to read between the lines, but telling us an origin story in this novel. It talks about her childhood and ultimately how she became a writer. It's sad. There's a lot of disappointment, a lot of neglect. I highly recommend it if you like small stories about ordinary people. I think I'm detecting a pattern here when I look at all these books I've chosen for my top 10 books. Number 8 is Stilsville by Susanna Daniel. This is a very, again, small story about a woman's life. Its themes are about the bonds of marriage, the fragile bonds of friendship, relationship between mother and daughter, the tragedies that happen to us in life that affect our outcomes. The premise of the book is about a married couple. His family owns a Stilsville house in Florida before the hurricane that came and wiped those houses out. They're houses that are on big stilts. They mostly spend them, they're like cabins almost. They go there for the weekends and little vacations during the summer. But mostly it's just looking at her internal story as she tells it to us about her marriage. And I don't know what else to say about it other than I love the writing, and the story just profoundly moved me. I think about it a lot even today, even though I haven't read it in a few years. I'm going to try and talk about my number 7 one more time. I've taped it several times and not been able to come up with exactly what I wanted to say about it, but it's E.M. Forster's A Passage to India. And what I finally realized that the novel is about is connection. And most of the cultures and genders and nationalities of people in this book do not connect. But there are a few moments of connection, and ultimately in this last novel that he wrote, E.M. Forster was trying to expand upon his theory or his philosophy that the only thing that really matters in life is our connections to each other. So I think that's why the book sticks with me like it has, because it really resonated with me when I read it the first time. And then I also read it in college for an English novel course that I took. And even at that point, the book meant more to me when I was writing essays about it and talking about it in class. So I think E.M. Forster is able, for me as a reader, to weave a spell. And he talks about things that we feel that we might not ever say. I reread Howard's End this year too, and he's just a master of human emotion, and that's why I chose it for my number 7. And that's really all I can say about it. I don't know about you, if you've ever had a character you related to when you read a book as a child, but in Betty Smith's A Tree Grows in Brooklyn, I completely identified with Francine Nolan. She was my age, I think, when I read the book the first time. We have a lot in common. She was a reader and I'm a reader. Her father was an alcoholic and mine was too. Everything that she lived through, I think I had a parallel experience, minus the abject poverty. And she had a whole team of very strong aunts, and her mother was strong, and I had the same scenario. So I think when you start that way, and then also just as endearing as the novel is itself, then I latched onto it and I read it many times through the years. I haven't read it probably in about 15 years now, but it's still way up on the list at number 6. Okay, here's my cliche pick. Can you guess? It's number 5, Jane Eyre by Charlotte Bronte. My grandmother always told me that Jane Eyre was her favorite novel. And so when I was about 12, I picked it up off her shelf, I read it, and I could not stop reading it. The story of this rejected little girl going to this poverty-stricken school and then becoming a governess, and all of the romantic and spiritual adventures that come her way throughout the rest of the story, I was riveted by. What's not to love? The moors, the poverty, and the romantic love too, even though, yes, problematic that he's got a wife sequestered in the attic. Spoiler alert. Number 4 is a book I have not really seen ever discussed on BookTube. It's Carol Shields' The Stone Diaries. I read this when it was published, and I've read it probably 3 times over the course of my adulthood. It's a story about a woman who doesn't think much of herself, yet she's very profoundly influential on her family. It's a so wonderfully written story. I don't have much to say about it other than just think you should pick it up and read it. I've been a big fan of all of Carol Shields' novels over time. I think I've read just about all of them, and she was great. She died too soon. Gotta love Canadian women authors. Here we go, number 3. I'm in a book club with a woman who says that she does not like books that cover the entire span of a person's life. And I think I'm the exact opposite. So my number 3 favorite book is William Boyd's Any Human Heart. It's a novel written as a series of journal entries. And when the book starts out at the beginning, the character is a teenager, and he's not a nice kid. He's kind of a jerk. But over the course of his life and all the adventures he goes through in boarding school, and then work during the war, his romantic relationships, and then his spiritual relationship at the end, it just never fails to amaze me when I read it what a good book that is, and how much I feel like I know the main character. So Any Human Heart, highly recommend. All right, I think you've heard about the premise of the next novel, my number 2 on the list. It is about a girl, a baby. She's born. Minutes later, she dies. The next chapter, the same baby is born. A few days later, she dies, and so on through a long course of history in the 20th century. Her name is Ursula Todd, and the name of the book is Life After Life by Kate Atkinson. What an amazing story it is, and I feel that I know Ursula Todd as well as I know any character after reading this book 3 times. I think I'll be reading it for the rest of my life when I need to immerse myself in something familiar. So heartfelt. It's so lovely. I did read it's not a sequel, but the companion novel, A God in Ruins, which is about Ursula's brother, Teddy. And I just have to say, it didn't have the same hold for me as Life After Life, but it's still beautiful. So if you haven't had a chance to read it, you should put it on your list. I'm not exactly sure how to talk about my number 1 book. It's got a terrible title. It's called Old Filth by Jane Gardam. Old Filth refers to an acronym, Filth being failed in London, try Hong Kong. And it's about a lawyer who didn't do well in London and failed to establish a career. And so he went on to Hong Kong and had a brilliant legal career and became a judge. And so the book starts when he is an old man, widowed, and he's looking back on his life. And that sounds boring and that sounds predictable, but this book is anything but boring or predictable. It talks all about his birth, and some of it's very funny and some of it's very droll, and then all the things that happen to him subsequently. He has a terrible father, and he has his brains, and he has some other good people that help him along the way. If you have a chance to read this book, I implore you to pick it up. It's just so lovely. And lovely is it's kind of a trite word, and book's not trite. It's a little mini masterpiece. So, my number 1 book, Old Filth by Jane Gardam. If you've read any of these books and have anything to say or any recommendations, I would love to hear them. I haven't watched a lot of these tag videos because I didn't want the anxiety of influence to, help me choose other books that might not have been my first reaction. So I will be going in and finding these other videos and linking them below, and linking Jason's original tag below. Thank you so much for sitting through this and watching, and let's have a discussion if you'd like in the comments. Thank you. And I will see you in the next video. Bye.